The Sandia Mountain Pontee, the extraterrestrial portrait art of Sue Walker. Copyright 2019, Sue Walker. My name is Sue Walker. Thank you to the Pontee for their patience and love, and for helping me become a better artist and a better human being. In September 2015, I was asked by a friend if I could draw their portrait. I hadn't drawn anyone in 40 years. It was my extraterrestrial Pontee friend, Commander Tilcomb, who asked. This was the best I could do at the time. Since then, a few things have changed. As the Pontee worked with me, day by day my skills improved. When I started, I was using black charcoal on white paper. Now, almost exclusively, I work with pastel chalk on black paper. Unless noted with an earlier year, the following portraits were all done in 2019. I want to express a very special thank you to Jason Navarra and the other volunteers who added their colorful artistic touches to the background of some of the original black and white portraits. Beginning in alphabetical order by crew member's name, here are the Sandia Mountain Pontee, 2019. This is Dell. He is what they refer to as their fleet master. Dell is our equivalent of a head mechanic, a manager of the hangar bay, but more than that, he takes care of all of the sentient and conscious craft that the Pontee fly. Here he's working with one of his examination tools on a problem. Overhead, the light you see, that's a anti-gravity small light that he carries in his pocket. He refers to as a floater because it stays put and floats wherever you place it in the air. This is also Dell. He is the oldest member that I know of at the Sandia Mountain Information Station, one of the few older than Tilcomb. Here we have Depp. Depp works with Nawal and is another trainer of the individuals who come to make house calls or visit us. When I sketched this, he was scolding or disciplining someone that hadn't quite done something right at the station in their studies, and I dubbed this image Back in 2017, one of the other first members of the crew, other than Tilcomb, Radar, and Rudy, we were introduced to was Grayson. And I was trying to understand from Grayson what he looked like that was different, or what about him was different. This year in 2019, I redid Grayson's portraits, and he is a visiting liaison. He's their cultural literature expert. He studies and gathers some of the very, very best of our literature to save. He is also a fan of our William Shakespeare, and this portrait I dubbed "To Ping or Not to Ping." Jael was introduced to us this year as their cultural music collector. She is a musician herself and one of the visiting liaisons. She was trying to explain to me one day the sound created by one of their instruments that's harp-like on Pontel. And she asked if I knew what the sound of a waterphone was like. I'd never heard one. And so I brought this image uh, or the waterphone up on the internet, and she tried to explain to me the similarities and differences between that and the instrument she was trying to describe. Um, this portrait is called Lost in Waterphone Tones. I'll show you the instrument she was trying to describe to me in a moment. This is also Jael. When she comes to visit or when I first hear from her, oftentimes the very first thing I hear out of her mouth is, "Oh, hello." This shell-like instrument was what Jael was trying to describe to me. On their world, ocean shells can grow rather large, and this one happened to have some gill-like structures near its mouth, and when they dried, they became crystalline, and they plucked them with their fingers and made a crystalline kind of pinging kind of sound. Also, the back, they carved out the extra spaces between the shells and could pluck them or work with them with a mallet. They tuned them. In the base of the shell, you notice it's sitting on a table. They would fill the bottom of the shell, she said, with water. And as you play it, you move this heart-shaped shell back and forth. And the water shifts and moves and changes and sloshes, and the reverberation of the tone alters slightly. So this is Jael playing the heart. This is also Jael this year. She wanted a more accurate, more serious portrayal of what she really looked like. When Drudy was first introduced to us, she did let me know that she frequently is seen wearing scarves of all kinds on her head. She prefers silk, but she'll drape them, she'll wrap them, she'll tie them. She said, "I don't like my head cold." So back in 2017, one of the first portraits that I did of Trudy was with her scarf. That same year, or shortly thereafter, she wanted to let me know that she wanted a portrayal of a portrait with this kind of a pose. And I said, "Okay, why is that?" She said, "Well, I find that it's important to let other cultures know that are new to us that we pray." I said, "What do you pray for?" She said, "I pray for peace." We redid Drudy at the end of 2018 and came up with this partial silhouette and dubbed it, "Are You Brave Enough to Call Out into the Darkness?" Earlier this year, for the first time ever, I pinged the mountain and happened to find Drudy, and she was very, very sad, almost devastated, and sitting, staring out at the landscape. And I said, "Drudy, what's wrong?" Well, she'd lost someone far, far away and had not been able to attend their memorial type of service. And it was, she had received the information of her friend's passing far too late to attend anyway, but she was sitting and thinking about someone that she'd lost. So we call this tea at O Dark 30. One of the Twitter followers one day asked if they wore makeup. And she said, we wear face color. And I went, "Okay, there's an interesting discussion. Can you tell me more about, do you wear jewelry? Do you wear makeup? What do you do when you get all dressed up? And she indicated that they do wear jewelry, this type of chains and jewels decorating around the head as well as around the neck are very common. The small dot tattoo that you see along beside one ear she has there, they refer to uh, as gesketape. It's very, very similar to our application of henna for Mendi tattoos on the backs of our hands and tops of our feet for, say, Hindu or Indian holidays. But they add this temporary plant-based tattoo with small brushes in tiny dots. Oftentimes, she said the patterns were organic or natural geometry. So when she gets all dressed up, this is what she looks like, she says. So this is Trudy all dolled up. Earlier this year in 2019, I wanted to redo Trudy with her scarves on her head, and so I asked her to grab her favorite, and she donned it and said, "This is my blue silk scarf." Kama is one of the new visiting liaisons that we were introduced to this year. One of the few things that we know about Kama is that she has an almost perfect memory, especially for visual details. Kananda also is new to us. Kananda is one of their liaisons who specifically works with the blended team members, but more than that, she works with the teaching of the blended or hybrid children. Kit was introduced to us as an individual who evaluates Earth humans for their uh, learning in dream state. And are they ready for the next type of learning or the next phase of learning? Our friend Jason Navarro took the original black and white of Kit napping and added this background. It is still called Forever Dreaming. Mim is their cultural art expert and collector. She encourages contactees to draw their visitations because she says that when you draw something, you access different memory pathways than when you write it out in words. And oftentimes we'll pick up other details you didn't know that you remembered. This is also Mim. She has a rather typical, quirky, slight smile. And so we just dubbed this portrait Mim's Smile. Nawal is the head of the training operations for the Sandia Mountain Information Station. Tealcom, Dell, Tani, and Nawal would be the four oldest team members that we've met. Nawal came to the Sandia Mountain Information Station as their trainer shortly after Tealcom arrived and has been teaching new arrivals, new staff members, how to go about their style of visiting us Earth humans. This is also Nawal. Nawal oftentimes has a rhetorical teaching method where he poses a question, oftentimes just to hear the depth of understanding of the response of his students. And Nawal's scrutiny is what this one is called. He watches and watches the details very closely. There's not much that gets by that man. This is Orth. He is assistant to Thought, who is the chief of security for the Sandia Mountain Information Station. Orth takes the data from the liaisons who have come to visit us and correlates all of that data in order to understand best assignments and get things back and sorted out, and information gathered that's necessary for their purposes. And he is one of the few staff members that we've come across who feels gay to us, homosexual rather than heterosexual. This is also Orth with his checklist, taken information from the returning ships that have come back to the hangar bay. Somebody asked Orth one day, "What color are your eyes?" And so he asked me to do this, just to demonstrate that they are a kind of a rich mahogany brown, almost cherry wood. This is PETA. After Radar Teocumtini, PETA was also one of the first other individuals that we were introduced to. PETA's specialty area is children, and he's just a lovable, friendly soul. When I did this portrait initially, he asked for me to draw him peeking around, and I said, a tree, a corner, a door, what? He said, yes. And I put him peeking around this edge that could be interpreted as any of the above, and thought I was done with the sketch. And I was walking away and about ready to leave the studio, and he contacted me again. He said, Sue, could you add one more thing, please? And I turned around, went back to my easel. I said, sure, PETA, what can I do? And he said, do you know what an infinity sign looks like? And I went, well, yeah. He said, would you put one up high with the word friendship underneath it, please? And so the very last thing on this portrait was the addition of the infinity symbol and the word friendship per PETA's instructions. This is also PETA, just turning back and looking, slight grin. When I first did Radar in this portrait, he was just beginning to learn guitar and was just enthralled with the fact that one of the other contactees, a musician and professional guitar teacher up in the Toronto, Canada area by the name of Kevin Estrella, had volunteered to study their four-fingered hands and figure out how to teach him guitar, because holding the neck of the guitar and doing the fretwork was a little different with four fingers than it is with four fingers and a thumb. So Radar is their pilot, or one of their pilots, but he's also their Earth media specialist. Radar keeps his finger on the pulse of what we Earth humans feel and think about extraterrestrials based on the influence that our media, movies, television, radio, podcasts, etc., have on us. Radar's real name is Rahaz, and when he first told me his name, he said, rhymes with Oz, as in the Wizard of. Radar is a real cut up and likes to get a laugh every chance he gets. I was map framing some of my portraits one day, and he picked up a frame and said, I'm framed. I said totally framed. This is Radar, an updated version of the first one you saw with the guitar. I said, what do you want me to call this one? Radar? And he said, no, we be jamming, man. This year, after all the different fun and antics and interesting images that we did, I said, Radar, how about if we just do a serious one with you as yourself? And so this is called Radar as himself. The Ponte love to study cultural things about anyone that they're trying to learn more of. And dance would be included in cultural things. The Ponte actually love to dance. And one of the questions that we were first asked by trainees about dance on Earth is, did you learn moonwalking on the moon? This is Sarah back in 2018. Sarah is got a twofold position at the Sandia Mountain Information Station. When she is not there, she usually is found doing studies along the Pacific Ocean because, honestly, she's an aquatic expert. But most recently, we've seen her more in her role as official first contact historian. She spent a great deal of time studying all the various permutations, the ups and downs, ins and outs, what worked, what didn't work, of official first contacts of hundreds of worlds. And so, Sarah, this is her original in 2018, and this is Sarah in 2019. I saw a falling meteor one day and said, make a wish. And she said, you make a wish on meteors? And I said, we make a wish on falling stars because they're considered fascinating, mystical, magical. And so the next time she saw a shooting star, she turned to the person next to her and said, on Earth, you say, make a wish. This is Tima. Tima, you notice, has ear cartilage. She is one of the blended or hybrid folks that works at the Sandia Mountain Information Station. I have never gotten out of her what she is a blend of. I don't know that it's terribly, terribly important. I know that she and another gal by the name of Tay had gone through their training together with Depp and Noel in order to come be liaisons visiting us. This is Thera. Thera is a cetacean or whale and dolphin language expert. She rotated through the Sandia Mountain Information Station, and that's how we met her. But honestly, her full-time work now is at an under-ocean aquatic facility located between Australia and New Zealand called the Tasman Sea Base. This is Thera. It's called surfacing. This is also Thera. It originally was in black and white, and Jason Navarro added the coloration that you see here, and it's entitled Swimming the Deep. They're very concerned about our oceans. Very, very concerned about the climate change that they see happening there. Here we have Commander Thought, or Thought. I don't know that I could say he's Commander Thought. I maybe have misspoke there. I do know that Thought is their chief of security. He looks rather stern here. he does have a softer side. Earlier in 2019, he came back to the station with a very tiny kitten. I believe it was May of this year. And I said, "Thought, you have a kitty." He said, "It followed me home." And followed me back to the station, is what he meant. And I said, "What's its name?" He said, "Lost." I said, "Its name is Lost?" He said, "Well, I asked him his name, and he said, 'I'm lost.' I assumed that was his name." Thought also is a trained energy worker. There, and you notice here that he has actual muscles. Um, Contrary to Hollywood opinion, yes, they do form muscles. Yes, they can get buff. Yes, thought works out and uh, works at a facility, a training facility inside the station that reminds me of a ninja workout course or a ninja gym. This is Thought creating an energy ball in his hands that he called a thought ball. One of the first portraits I did of Commander Tilcom was this one, and this pose was at his request, with his eyes closed, with his fingers on his forehead, trying to ponder out what to do next. And as I worked trying to understand their hands, the length of their joints in their hands, whether or not they had fingernails, what their palms were like, uh, all of those details. I tried, uh, or this was one of my first attempts at getting those details correct. Tilcom came to me one day and he said, "Would you sketch me this way?" And I agreed, of course. I wasn't quite sure why, except he expressed a desire to demonstrate anatomy from the shoulders on up, collarbones and everything else. Back in 2018, Tilcom was teaching us about proper greeting gestures and put his hands together with his fingertips touching over his chest, like we do when we say namaste. And we were taught that that greeting gesture was universally understood by species who had hands. Back in 2018, Tilcom also taught us a way of saying goodbye. And one of their phrases when they part company with someone else, especially if that person is very special to them, is to say, "I hold the light for you." When he's off duty, Tilcom regularly goes down to our Great Barrier Reef down by Australia in order to swim the Great Barrier Reef, but also when he gets the opportunity. He says he speaks with the whale nations there. So this is called consulting with the whale nations. Elephants are sentient, according to the Ponti. And Tilcom one day asked me if I would please do a portrait of him with just this pose. And he had just come back from Africa and Thailand, both speaking with the elephants about the climate changes that were coming. And so this portrait is called Mind Speaking with the Elephants. People asked Tilcom, "What color are your eyes?" Well, his other nickname, his old blue eyes. When we were first introduced to Ni, clearly was still practicing, not having drawn faces of anybody in 4 decades. And so this first portrait of Chini, uh, done back in 2016, I look at now and look at the eyes and I cringe. However, we have redone her several times. In 2018, this was the first ever color portrait I did of any of them. I wanted to understand if they were all shades of gray skin tone, and they indicated no, no, no. Some of them are taupey brown, some of them are more tan, some of them are more light gray, some are darker grays, and so there is a range. Tani is the author of the Telepathy 101 primer. We redid Tani's image this year, and so this is Tani in 2019. Yurt was their entomologist and honestly is one of the regular visitors to Albuquerque native and contactee Gloria Hawker, who has whose journey with the Ponti and her extraterrestrial visitation experiences were written up by Bud Hopkins, the famous UFO author. Yurt keeps track of the insect populations for North America. We just met Zoot this year. He was one of Radar's apprentices and was learning and training under our buddy Radar. And so in order to become a visiting liaison, to spend time with some more experienced staff members. So we dubbed this one Radar's Apprentice. Zufu used to be a North American freshwater um, lakes, creeks, and rivers aquatics expert in the Central Plains of the United States, and saw all of the interaction the other staff members were having with the Earth human public and wanted to develop his understanding and his conversation and style and learning of slang and everything else much better. So he transferred from the aquatics department that keeps track of our environmental issues to the information station desk and began interacting with folks on Twitter. Zufu has shared quite a few phrases in their language, and one of them is Dokyue Kiwahu. Dokyue is their word for first glimmer of morning light pre-dawn, and Kiwahu is blue water people. So it's another way of saying good morning, everybody. Dokyue Kiwahu. After we did this portrait, we redid it this year in black and white. Still Zufu with his coffee cup in hand. And so we called this one Zufu's Coffee Refilled. I've been experimenting with all kinds of new artistic techniques this year, overt, subtle, and this one of the very, very faint, almost nebulous starry background turned out quite well. It was portrayed as a face looking down on our world, and we called it Watching Over. Radar requested this image, and it's entitled, So, Who Wants a Ride? This is one of the trainees. I think he called himself a dendrologist. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation. He's a guy that studies the rings of trees and the age of trees and species. So This is called honoring the trees. The Sasquatch nations and the Ponti are actually very good friends culturally and know one another and interact on a regular basis. It is not unusual for Sasquatch researchers to come back reporting they've seen UFOs or others, meaning folks that aren't from Earth. But back when we first were introduced to radar, radar had become friends with a young Sasquatch male by the name of Kie. And Kie lives about an hour's drive north and north of us here in the Albuquerque area, up in a dormant supervolcano known as the Valles Caldera. And so one day, radar went to go visit Kie up in the Valles, and they were cutting up, and I decided it might be a good way to portray their friendship as a culture. So this is radar and Kie up in the Valles Caldera. This portrait is called Be Good. But the real question is, who's saying it to who? Their meteorologists are very, very concerned about the build-up that they see of the intensity of the storms changing the face of our planet. And we call this one colliding supercells. Early on, when we were discussing visiting Earth humans with some of the trainees, we had to explain to them that some Earth humans call anybody with a Zeta body type a gray, and that sometimes extraterrestrials are referred to as little green men. And this trainee looked at his skin, looked at me, held his two hands up and said, "You mean I'm a little green guy?" One of the gestures that they've taught us is a greeting gesture, especially if we meet one of them in a close encounter of the fifth kind or CE5 situation, is to put your two hands together and make a bowl, and very slowly but gently extend it out toward the person that you're speaking with. They refer to this as offering the bowl. And when you offer the bowl to someone, it is a nonverbal gesture that means welcome, or welcome, I have something for you. You can take this same bowl formed by your hands and gesture it toward a chair, which non-verbally means I offer you a place to sit. You can take the same bowl of your hands and gesture it toward food or beverage. I offer you this food or drink. So offering the bowl. We're practicing working with eyes, eye sockets, tear ducts, nose cartilage, which varies among them, by the way. Some of them have a little button nose like this. Others are basically just almost flat cartilage, flat to their nose and slits with no little button. But we dubbed this image, I See You. A lot of contactees report that they see very tall owls or very large, unusual bunnies, or something else that clearly, as you examine the situation afterwards, is a screen memory implanted by the Ponti so that they come across as a known animal that they feel that their visitation subject won't be afraid of. And so this portrait is called Screen Memories. Ooh, me? I was talking about cloaking, invisibility, catching them in your peripheral vision, uh, breaking through their invisibility with an angled reflection, And radar suggested this image of light wrapping around them in this fashion. And we dubbed this one Invisible Peace. Gloria Hawker was the one who described to me when the Ponte came to visit her in her bedroom when she was ill one day. And she said, the foot of my bed, the wall dissolved in a sea of sparkles, and a circle about 8 feet across, and a whole group of them walked into my bedroom through that circle of sparkles in the wall. So here we've portrayed that same concept, and it's called Just Visiting. No more monkeys. The young boy portrayed in this image is Micah Pearson in Dover, England. Micah and his family have a podcast on YouTube called Fascination Street. And Radar and PETA first came to visit Micah, and they have been witnessed by him dancing in his room to the music playing, as well as jumping on his bed. And so we dubbed this image No More Monkeys, as in jumping on the bed. When Elon Musk put a red Tesla vehicle into orbit, the Ponte had all kinds of fun with the what ifs of what they could do with Starman's red Tesla. This is one of the ideas that they had. And so if the onboard camera to Starman's red Tesla is still operating, they may want to review their footage for a hitchhiker. A month ago in October, the new trainees were going through understanding holiday cultural traditions in North America. And we had to describe to them the carving of large orange gourds with sharp knives to make faces and put a light inside as a tradition that we have as part of what used to be our last harvest festival, Samhain, which is now Halloween, bordering on All Saints' Day. So this was the trainees' first ever attempts at carving pumpkins and is called Jack-o'-lanterns 101. I asked Radar what else he did in his off-duty hours, and basically the answer I got back was if it's unusual, daring, fun, fast, exciting, and doesn't cost a whole lot, and he can get Tilcom to okay it, he'll try it. And surfing qualified in that category. And he asked me when I was doing this one, do they still say cowabunga among the surfers in California? I didn't know. I had to ask. So this is simply called cowabunga, dude. Zoot also gets in on the act of understanding cultural things here on our planet. And they were teaching some of the staff members the rules to basketball and about shooting hoops and dunking baskets. And when Zoot went to try and dunk a basket, he got a little hung up. So this is called hanging 8. We blame Dell, their fleet master, for acquiring the first ever Earth unicycle at the station. He thought it would be a good way to keep Radar and Radar's buddies out of the hangar bay in their off-duty hours. And so he got this for them for their amusement to ride up and down the corridors. They found that they loved it all so much that now that there's a sign-up schedule for who gets to practice on the unicycle when. The unicycle. You're their entomologist did let us know that they are counting various species in our insect population, not just butterflies, not just bees. And they took the trainees to the cornfields of the Midwest one year in August and did an estimate count on firefly populations. They were enthralled. Many of them had never experienced an insect like fireflies before on Earth. And so this is called counting fireflies. Like many of the cultural things on our planet, there's a lot of details that are important to learn, and they knew that manners and traditions and rules and practice using utensils to properly eat food for various cultures on this planet were an important thing to learn. And so we sat them down one day and essentially said, here's a fork, here's a large spoon, here's a plate of pasta. We need to teach you about twirling. And so this is part of their twirling lessons, where they had to learn to twirl spaghetti using the large spoon onto the fork before they put it in their mouth. This fall, PETA let us know that they tried marshmallows roasted over an open fire for the first time ever. And he had to understand what it was meant when somebody asked him golden brown or burnt and crispy, meaning, how do you like your roasted marshmallows? Peter decided he was a burnt and crispy guy. Shh, I found Pop-Tarts. This image was originally drawn because of an incident from a visiting liaison to one of our regular contactees in the Brisbane, Australia area, who tried to first sneak some Pop-Tarts out of a pantry at the home of one of our regular contactees in that area, and then later ended up uh, getting his Pop-Tarts, but instead out of a baggie in a tree in the backyard. If you'd like to learn more about that story, visit our other website, the Sandia Mountain Ponte and their worldwide CE5 contact 2019. You're looking for the story of Wookiee. July 4th this year was the American 4th of July holiday. It's the time of year where it's usually quite hot and frequently a time of year where Americans oftentimes will break down and make homemade ice cream. And so we introduced the Ponte to the concept of homemade ice cream. They tried it, they liked it, but decided it became very melty, very fast. And this image is called Share the Melty. It wasn't until, I think it was October last month, we were talking to Radar about foods on Pontel versus foods on Earth and similarities and differences. And he said, we love your Whole Foods. And at the time, he happened to have a cake donut on his finger. But he indicated that they have foods on Pontel that have holes in them, made of grains, very similar to our donuts and bagels. And so they stick the food or whatever it is, or however many they want, on their fingers to munch on them or carry them from place to place. We love your Whole Foods. Trudy was letting us know about the holding the light for you phrase, and we illustrated this as a symbol of that. Instead of her generating an energy or a thought ball, she just had a small candle in her hand and was a light in the darkness. Speaking of foods and traditions and sharing information, we had a real good discussion with the Ponte one day about holiday traditions that they have back on Pontel. This hat that you see is actually a woven hat, like a basket hat, tied under the chin with a cloth strap or something there the equivalent. But they use it to dip it into the ocean water when very small fish, fingerling size fish, are running by the millions. And so you can dip your hat in and come up with an entire basket of fish. What you don't see in this image is that the hat actually has a point to the top of it. So after you've caught all your fish in your seining hat, you take it back up to the beach and you plant the point in the sand to let all the excess water drain out. And then you take the fish home and either preserve them, dry them, do whatever with them. But it was one of their traditions where on the holiday when all the fish ran along the beaches, they would all take their seining hats and go down together and make it a big fun party and go take the seining hats into the ocean, collect their fish, plant the hats on the beach, wait until they're all drained out, and take those fish home to preserve for their families. Seining Hat Day. We sip the soup. January every year, the Ponte go into seclusion for 3 to 4 days. And they, during that time, can elect to fast, but most of them sip soup. And the soup is a symbolic food that represents the collective consciousness for them, which often has the nickname of, quote, the soup, unquote. So we sip the soup, we say thank you to the collective consciousness for everything that it provides for us. The image before that I showed you of moonwalking on the moon, this was the original that our friend Jason Navarra took and added the moon background to. This is when they were first learning to moonwalk. Last December, 11 months ago, around the winter solstice, there was a dance contest, just for fun, as part of their enjoyment of our winter holidays. And they had been studying various forms of dance, and Radar had been studying more than most of them. And this is entitled Putting on the Ritz. Trudy came in second in the dance contest. She had become enthralled with the dances of Liza Minnelli and Cabaret at the time. And so this is called Cabaret Trudy. Here in Albuquerque, there is a very well-known Latin dance studio that rivals in their teaching of flamenco dance studios in Spain. And so if you want to learn flamenco, you go 2 places on the planet, apparently, Albuquerque and Spain. And so we've called this one Learning Flamenco. They like our castanets. Sharing the sunset, watching sunsets and being thankful for the day, common in many of their cultures. And they do miss home now and again. This is dreaming of home. We had a discussion with the trainees before it got really cold this year about snow and what you do in the snow. And many of them had never seen snow, much less seen snow on Earth. And so we had to teach them about the various kinds of snow. There's packing snow, there's skiing snow, there's sleet and thunder snow and and freezing drizzle and ice storms and blizzards. And so they were learning all of this terminology. When it was close to freezing and the snow was coming down in very large, wet, heavy flakes, the Ponti went out and had a hands-on laboratory dealing with snow. And this was one of their first snowballs ever. Followed by Snowman 101. And so now the Ponti ask us, and sometimes ask the Twitter followers, if it snows where they are, if it was snowman snow, because they learned. We were discussing holiday traditions with the trainees and Radar as well, and he was cutting up, and we were talking about Kris Kringle and Santa Claus and coming down the chimney and Rudolph and reindeer and sleighs and presents and Christmas trees. And so Radar asked me to portray this because it was part of the holiday tradition. And it's called Who? Me, Santa? This is Grayson, dressed as William Shakespeare and dubbed Grayspear. The trainees are frequently nervous when they come visit us. They're afraid about making mistakes. They're afraid about getting scared. They don't know what we're going to do any more than we know what they're going to do sometimes. So this is the nervous training. We've done a variety of emotional expression things because some people assume that the Ponti had no emotions. Nothing could be further from the truth. And so we have, oh! Say what? Oh my. Too funny, dude. Gathering patience. Perturbed. Hilarity. So very thankful. We also, because Radar is their Earth media specialist, have had a variety of discussions over the past 6 years about our movies and television and things. And so we joked around with Radar about portraying him in some of these various guises. Radar is a hat lover and has an entire collection of Earth hats. And so when he donned this fedora, he wanted to have a bullwhip from the Indiana Jones movies because of the fedora, and we kind of nixed the bullwhip idea, but we still named this portrait Indiana Radar. This is the sage from the swamp. You may recognize a nod to Master Yoda. Close Encounters of the Ponti kind. And this is a nod to Men in Black. Brinkman is an inside joke. A Brinkman is somebody who's always pushing the edge of the envelope, always pushing the edge of the rules, always taking things right up to the brink. That's what a Brinkman is. Grayson and our friend from Australia that had come to visit were giving Radar a hard time about his piloting skills, and together they both were saying, Brinkman. So this is Brinkman in Black. A nod to Men in Black. Back to the When? Marty McFly, Back to the Future, move over. I think we found somebody else. I mentioned one of the blendeds earlier by the name of Tay. She and Tima go visit people. Believe it or not, they enjoy sleeping with things that are soft and cuddly in their arms as much as many of us do. So this is Tay and her teddy. Some of the blendeds end up with more hair than others, some more nose cartilage, some more ear cartilage. The blended hybrids have a whole range of different kinds of looks, some more Ponti-like or Zeta-like, others much more human-like. And so this is called blended in silhouette. What do their little babies look like? They look like our preemies. And this is called preciousness. I don't think that this child was more than 12 inches long when I saw it. To learn more about the Ponti, you can go to officialfirstcontact.com or visit them on Twitter at Sandia Wisdom or Sandia the ET. You can help Earth get ready for Official First Contact. Check out our new nonprofit. It's called the InfiniteVoiceProject.org to learn more. A gallery of the original portraits will soon be available for sale on Official First Contact. We're trying to get that going now. And you'll find some of the favorites that you just saw in this presentation at our Redbubble store, Sandia OFC. And the sales help with our behind-the-scenes costs of Official First Contact. Please wear your day with ease, and Dick Dick, thank you. This has been Sue Walker, and if you need to write me, you can do so at sue@officialfirstcontact.com. Wear your day with ease, guys. Thanks.